Aaron Gordon's going to be out. They're not sure for how long. That calf is acting up again, which is not good news. Obviously, that's a concern. But was there an owl
Is there
acting
a
up?
dove that's in this room?
I think there's a pigeon outside the window in my apartment. Is what's going on.
That pigeon
It's
does not
life in New York City.
like MacMahon. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we are doing on Tuesday afternoon. Joining me from New York City, where he saw the Brooklyn Nets beat the Los Angeles Lakers in a game that was probably disappointing for both sides in some ways, Tim Bontemps.
And I would say in many ways.
Yeah, that tanking race ain't gonna win itself. Joining us from
Certainly not.
Dallas,
Hello,
Texas. Hello. Joining us from Dallas, Texas, where he's on a short layover between Oklahoma City and Houston. He was at the Thunder's, well, I guess I should say the Nuggets' bounce back victory against the Thunder on Monday night is Ben MacMahon.
Howdy, partners. Listen, I thought that scene in Brooklyn last night was brilliant strategy by the Lakers. They do not want Oklahoma City to get the seventh overall pick. Let Brooklyn get a win. You know, it's that Brooklyn Philly neck and neck thing. The top Sixers are now in sixth in the lottery standing. So, you know, the Lakers outsmarting the competition once again. And Wendy, I am confused by your setup though, because it's afternoon and we've got a night scene there. So I don't know what's going
Listen,
on.
it's always cool. Where I'm always at, it's always chill. It's always chill here, LA nights. By the way, you had a story on Sunday. I just want to talk about this briefly, that the Mavericks finished the game on Sunday with 7 healthy players, which,
Yeah, two of whom were on minutes restrictions and hit them in the fourth quarter. So Kessler Edwards, who bonked heads with Dwight Powell, Dwight goes in the back and gets stitches on his forehead. He looks like Herman Munster, although we didn't know who that was. We mentioned it. And then they didn't teach the Munsters classes at Stanford, I guess. And then Kessler Edwards, he actually didn't have to get stitches. He basically just had to get like his above his orbital bone glued back together. So he comes straight from the locker room, big old bandage over his left eye, passes the bench, goes to the scorer's table, checks in the game. That was the last. It was 6:05 left in the game. That was the last substitution Jason Kidd made. It was the last substitution that he could make if he was going to follow the minutes restrictions of Caleb Martin and Dante Exum.
well, we're just happy to see Caleb Martin in a Mavs jersey. The crazy thing about that story, I think Bobby Marks helped you with this. Even if the Mavericks wanted to sign another player to help them through this ridiculous injury situation, which is just compounded by, it's obviously the headline players with AD and Kyrie, but they have all kinds of role players out. They're not even allowed to sign anybody because they don't have any money left.
No, they're like 51 grand away from the first apron. They can't go over the first apron, by rule. A 10-day contract is 119 grand and change. This is why Moses Brown averaged 18 and 10 in his last 2 games on his 10-day with the Mavericks, and they couldn't keep him. They would have loved to. They literally could not keep the guy. Now, you mentioned obviously it's the stars. It's Kyrie. It's AD. PJ Washington has been in and now out again for a while with an ankle injury. Klay Thompson's the only, Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively II. Klay Thompson's the only healthy guy among their top 6 players. Fellas, they've got 2 of their two-way guys that are hurt now. Kai Jones played a game for the Mavericks after signing a two-way, has been out since with a strained quad. Brandon Williams had a career-high 31 points on a two-way deal in their loss to Memphis and was playing well again. Hamstring tightness. That's why he wasn't available the rest of that game. I mean, it is. And then, they started with 9. Williams is out. It's 8. And then freaking Dwight Powell and Kessler Edwards bonked heads chasing a rebound. Crazy. Edwards goes down. Dwight's got blood trickling from his forehead. They managed to field 8 players, which is the league minimum for last night's game in San Antonio, which they also managed to win that game.
Well, San Antonio knows the mission at this point. All right.
Yeah.
All that is interesting. Let's focus on the game that you were at, where one of the more interesting things that happened actually happened at the scorers table, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. I got to say, one of the amazing stats of the NBA season is that the Denver Nuggets are 12-1 on the second nights of back-to-backs. This one, MacMahon, I think they were maybe even planning on punting because you wrote about this, but they were planning on punting it, and Jokic didn't let them. And then we saw really an interesting game that we weren't expecting on Monday night.
Yeah, and Michael Malone tried to talk Joker into sitting out, and he texts him Sunday night because it was a Sunday afternoon game. So he texts him and he's spelled out like, look, your minutes, and I forgot the exact numbers, but they're like 38, 39, 45, 41. This is the third game in 4 nights. Joker's been dealing with a sore ankle. His right elbow, his shooting elbow, is all discolored and bruised right now. I mean, he had a rough shooting night. It was 2 of 10 from 3-point range Sunday because his elbow was killing him. And it's like, dude, it's not a rest game. Like, you're banged up. Like, let's take this one off. And Joker's reply was hell no. So, they listened to his question, but there really wasn't any question after that. Joker was going to play. Jamal Murray, who also lit it up last night, was questionable, but he planned on playing. Aaron Gordon's going to be out. They're not sure for how long. That calf is acting up again, which is not good news. Obviously, that's a concern. But was there an owl?
Is there a dove that's in this room?
I think there's a pigeon outside the window in my apartment. Is what's going on.
That pigeon does
life in New York
like
City.
MacMahon.
Okay, I'm trying to like discuss nuggets. I'm here like, what the hell is going on?
This window here, hold on. This window is open. I didn't realize it was open. Kelly likes to have the windows open.
That is absolutely staying in the podcast. I don't care what anybody says.
There we go.
So Joker plays, and by the way, it was a close game until it wasn't on Sunday. The SGA and really Jalen Williams and the Thunder just blew their doors off in the final few minutes. Ended up being a 24-point win. Joker plays, and dude, I mean, he was absolutely dominant. He only took 2 threes because he said like the elbows hurt him, so it had to be close to the rim. Went 1 for 2. The miss was a heave from the back court, which he leads the league in those shots, by the way. It's cost him the 3-point percentage title. But dude was 15 of 20 from the floor. What was it, like 35, 18, 8 assists? I mean, just an absolutely dominant performance. And naturally, Joker versus SGA.
They're coming to get him now. He is definitely in New York City. I was going to say, the only thing you hear more than pigeons
can't help
in New
the
York
ambient
is
noise in New York City.
Anyways, naturally, Joker versus SGA, it leads to an MVP discussion post-game. And, you guys have seen the quotes. I thought both Joker and Michael Malone were like pitch perfect with the way that they handled the discussion. I hate how toxic MVP discussions have become in recent years. Joker's not been, through no fault of his own, I'll say, has been part of that. But, Joker says, hey, I'm playing the best basketball of my life. If that's not enough,
that
it's not
qualifies enough. As, I mean, maybe I can't chapter and verse Jokic quotes for the last 5 years. If it's not the closest he's ever come to, his version of lobbying, it's got to be there. I mean,
it's in the top 5 for sure.
It was very much the Jokic, persona, because he was like, I'm playing the best basketball of my life. If that's enough, it's enough. If it's not, it's not, which is kind of his way of doing it. But
he said, if it's not, the guy deserves it, talking about SGA, and he's amazing. And then Malone, Malone lobbied hard for his guy. And the thing about Michael Malone is he comes prepared. He's on point. He lobbied hard for his guy while being extremely respectful and not only respectful, but like basically saying, hey, SGA is also a legitimate, deserving MVP candidate. But he says if you put player A and player B and you don't know which one's won 3 MVPs before, you're going to go with with Joker, and he says, if not, you're full of. I did ask if you do those stats include team record, and he was quick with it. He says, if you want to make that case, basically, so be it. But then he reminded people the one time Joker didn't win MVP over the last 4 years, the Nuggets were the number one seed in the Western Conference that year. So he came prepared, man. He came ready.
I remember when Harden was going up against, I think it was Westbrook, for the MVP. Daryl Morey like kind of went out like on a lobbying tour, and I remember one time I happened to be in New York and I did ESPN radio, and like I did it in the studio, and then I was going to the airport and I literally had done a full day of TV and I did this radio show, and I'm done and I'm in the bathroom changing out of my suit, and I think I had said before I was favoring Westbrook, and the producer stuck his head into the bathroom and he goes, "Hey, Daryl Morey is on with us for the next segment. He was on hold and he heard you debating that you thought Westbrook should win, and he wants to debate you. Can you come back on this next segment?" So like everybody, Michael Malone's talking points were very solid, but nothing like the tour that Daryl went on. But I think Bontemps, I think we should have a pact, and the pact should be that as we talk about this, we talked about this in the last pod, but as we talk about the MVP over the next couple of weeks, we're not going to drag down either player. At least
No.
in my realm, we're not going to say, well, Jokic this, or well, when SGA gets double teamed, which is what the Nuggets did to him down the stretch of this game. Well, I'm just not going to allow it in my sphere.
Real quick point on that, just a tiny little double team point. Yes, that's a thing the Thunder have to figure out. Also, they certainly would help matters if Jalen Williams, J-Dub, was on the floor in the second half with a hip strain. But, dude, there are no holes in either of these guys' cases. They are both phenomenal two-way players. Joker's defensive analytics are top of the charts. It's not in the traditional way you think of a center impacting defense, but Joker has, like, there's no holes in this. The guy's averaging a triple double and making a major defensive impact. He's a tremendous leader. There's no holes there. Shea leading the league in scoring for a team that has the best point differential in NBA history, major contributor to the number one defense link. There's no holes in either case. And I that's what I really appreciated about Malone's point is don't make it Nikola versus SGA. Like vote for one or the other, but you don't have to knock one guy to vote for the other guy.
All right, Bontemps, you're the king of the MVP projections.
I am.
Oh my God, what a day! What a day on the Upper West Side. What a day! Hey, wait till. Well, I'm not going to say. Go ahead, Bontemps.
What is the question? Who's going to win MVP?
I was going to say you're the guru of the MVP prognostication.
I am. I just don't really know where to go with that, other than to say that a couple weeks ago in the last straw poll, Shea was pretty clearly ahead, though not unanimously so. And we will see what happens in 3 weeks or so when we do the final straw poll a couple weeks out before the end of the season. But I still think he's probably going to win. As great as Jokic has been, it's going to be hard for him to win a fourth in 5 years. And if there's a tie is usually going to go to the guy who hasn't won. I think you just look at the history of the award. That tends to be
especially if that guy who hasn't won has a better record.
Well, I was going to say, there's two potential tiebreakers. Yeah. One, if it's even, you're probably going to go with the guy who hasn't won, as Malone acknowledged, essentially. And then two, if you can't decide which one, you're probably going to go with the guy who has a double-figure games lead in the conference standings.
Yeah, and also, like, the other thing that has to be acknowledged too is that the criterion for this award changes every year. There isn't a set determination of who should win and how they should win and what the things are to rank in terms of who wins the award or what should determine who wins the award, which is why it is such an interesting debate every year and why it does engender um, so much discussion throughout the season because everybody can have their own spin on what should matter. And it's why, Russell Westbrook could average a triple double and finish with the 6 or 7 seed in the West and win MVP. And other years, somebody can be the best player on a 65-win team like Jason Tatum last year and finish fifth. Like, it's all it's a different race every year. I am, as you guys said earlier, just very glad that we're looking at a situation where it seems like with a month to go in the regular season, it isn't going to become a very toxic discussion over
Hopefully.
how this should go and what it should look
And,
like. Well, I said it looks like that, and hopefully
yeah,
it stays
I
that way.
wouldn't make any. I wouldn't make any assumptions there. But the cause of the
Well,
toxicity was not.
it already was very toxic by this time in the past, and it is not at all this year. So I'm sure it will become a more lively debate over the next few weeks, but it was already ugly by now before,
Well,
and
Uh,
and if
it's
people
not this
were
year.
if people were hoping that this back to back where the teams played 2 games in a whatever it was 36-hour span in Oklahoma City would kind of allow voters to reach a conclusion, it didn't happen because they
well,
split.
in that game, the Nuggets had one of their best shooting games in the last 40 years. And you don't take it away from them. They did it against the league's top defense. I don't know if it's replicatable. I know Jokic averaging a triple double is replicatable, but in terms of the outcome. One more thing before we go. Something interesting happened in this game, MacMahon. First off, Mark Daigneault, the Thunder coach, he was annoyed with the officials early in the game, even though their karma was depleted on Sunday when Chet Holmgren should have fouled out with 10 minutes to go. They need another month of karma, but whatever. Because he doesn't like how when there's a turnover or there's a change of possession, Jokic a lot of times gets the ball very fast from the official and wants to throw it way down court. He wants to take advantage. He's been doing this for years. Mark Daigneault has clearly complained about this, and when the referees weren't, he was already annoyed with. He got a tech in the first half of this game. By the way, Daigneault for the first 4 years on the sidelines, he had something like 7 technicals. I think he's got 5 or 6 this year. He is definitely He's definitely stretching his wings into complaining about officials.
Well, and as he pointed out pregame, again, the Thunder have the largest free throw differential negatively in the
Got it.
league.
Check mark. Got it. All right. What did Daigneault do to slow Jokic down?
He pulled a move that he referred to as a permanent sub. And what he did was he had Dylan Jones, a rookie who I believe has probably played more minutes in the G League than the NBA this
This
season,
is
or at
total
least
rookie duty. This is akin to getting the donuts and having
hey,
the princess backpack.
yeah. He said, go stand at the scores table like you're going to check in, but you're not actually going to check in. We're going to pull you back and we're just going to leave you at the scores table. That way, every time that there's a change of possession, if there is this situation where Joker's trying to get the ball to fast break off of a change of an out of bounds or like you said an inbound situation, the refs have to acknowledge the guy at the scores table. Okay, you check it in. Oh wait, you're not. Okay, and it's just a way to delay Joker's inbounds tactics. Joker is hilarious in that he's so creative and aggressive in looking for every single tiny little margin to affect winning. And the inbound stuff is perfect because you got this situation, but then give the Nuggets a 6 or 8 point lead, and the man is the best in the league at bleeding the clock. Oh, whoops, the ball got away before I could inbound it after the other team scored. He said last year there was one, he was very proud. He said there was one time last year where he took 25 seconds. He managed to bleed 25 seconds off the clock in that situation late in the game. The NBA actually cracked down, and they did it league wide. But when they met with the Nuggets, I think it was Monty McCutcheon. It was one of the guys from the league office, one of the rest from the league office. They meet with every team preseason. They met with the Nuggets in Abu Dhabi, and they bring this up. And Joker apparently had, well, what about this scenario? What about that scenario? He had 6 questions, basically trying to figure out, okay, how can I legally waste time when we're protecting a lead in the fourth quarter? So that just tells you the guy looks for every single tiny little margin.
So what
And
happened is the referees looked over and said, said Dylan Jones come in the game. Then they were like, oh, actually, we're not going to put him in. We changed our mind. Okay. Then it happened again. They looked over and Dylan Jones was again being the permanent sub. I'm like, okay, come in the game. And they was like, actually, we're not going to put him in. And then they called delay a game. And so I suspect that there could be guidance coming from the legal office saying don't do that anymore. But
I don't even think there's going to be a need for guidance because it's not. It's just because I checked on it a little bit, and I mean, you can't. You you see teams trying to have substitutions during games, and the refs will say no, you can't do it, and it's because you have to be like over there ready to go. You can't like have the ball go out of bounds, and then say, oh, we're going to bring somebody in, have them get up off the bench and run over there. But you can maybe have a guy stand there and say, hey, we're going to wait till the next dead ball to do this, but you can't, like, you're not allowed to have somebody just chill there. So he
you
did
can
it to
change your
prove a point.
you can change your mind.
You can't
that's
change your
that all the
mind
time.
over and over
hence,
again. You
hence,
can't.
the, hence the, yeah, I know. Hence the name that Dagenhall gave it, permanent sub.
Yes, you're
That,
not
that's
allowed
now
to
Dylan
just have
Jones.
somebody chill.
They should change on
Yes.
the roster. His position should say PS, permanent sub.
Yeah.
But
So he
and
made his
really,
point. He made his point, and they called delay a game, and I think it was handled exactly how it should
Yeah.
have been. And also, if you watch the 2 minutes he was standing there, there were like 4 shooting fouls in 2 minutes anyway, so it didn't even really do anything to
All right.
accomplish the
but it
goal
was
of what they
about
wanted to do.
making a point, and so much of
Yeah, for
these
sure.
little post game comments, pre game comments, stuff like this. These are or coaches rather planting seeds with refs because look, there's a pretty good chance that these teams meet again, likely in the Western
Should be the
Conference
West
Finals.
Finals.
We got a big game coming up on Wednesday night on ESPN. Potential finals preview. Not that we're going to make any assumptions or disclude any teams or insult any fan bases. The Thunder are visiting the Celtics. Key for this game will be the injury report, which we don't know now. Jalen Williams hurt his hip Monday again, the game against the Nuggets. We'll see. And when Jalen Williams is out, it impacts them significantly, as Bontemps has talked about throughout the season. Also, before we talk about this game, Bontemps, you had a story about Kristaps Porzingis has missed 6 games with an illness, which they said was non-COVID. And he shed a little bit of light on it, but this was a little bit rattling, the story that you wrote this week.
I mean, I wouldn't say he shed much light on it at all. He just said that he has a viral illness that they haven't been able to fully figure out what it is. And I mean, he's been around the team. He's been on the bench during games. So it obviously it's a bit of a strange situation. But more than anything, we've all spent time around Kristaps. He's a great guy, and just hope that he's able to get healthy and be back on the court soon. Which it's hopefully that happens sometimes here in the near future. But certainly was unsettling to see that tweet Monday night laying out that he's got this illness that they can't figure out. And it's not like the Celtics don't have access to all sorts of
Healthcare.
high level medical people. So so certainly it's it's unsettling, but hopefully he's
In fact,
back on the mend and
arguably
back out there
one
again
of the
soon.
one of the biggest perks of being an NBA player is healthcare. You can get an MRI that night. You get injured, you can get an MRI.
Well, it's like the whole
hours.
Karis LeVert thing when he found out he had cancer when he got traded, right? Like you just do get you get checked out more than just about anybody on the planet. So hopefully, like I said, most important thing is hopefully Kristaps is healthy soon and back on the court.
Well, so the Celtics have had this series of test games at home over the last couple of weeks. The Cavs came in, the Cavs got them. The Lakers came in, they got the Lakers. Now the Thunder come in. And so, the Celtics remain the odds-on favorite. They've looked impressive with periods of going cold and losing focus. But this game probably has more skin in it for the Thunder because the Celtics, they've lost like a dozen games at home this year. especially without Jalen Williams. Like if the Celtics win, okay. If the Celtics lose, okay. It doesn't change their position. But a lot of people are, when I say a lot of people, I mean, people in the league are questioning, can the Thunder do this? Could the Thunder win 16 games? Could the Thunder win 12 playoff games? And so, interesting that the Thunder are coming off a loss. I think that might actually maybe get them a little bit more on edge, because if they lose 2 in a row, then it's like, oh my gosh, this is why people don't respect the Thunder. But, it doesn't mean everything, but it doesn't mean nothing, MacMahon.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, it's the Thunder are still early in the learning process about themselves, about how teams are going to defend them. Shea last night talked about, okay, listen, Minnesota got us with this, trapping thing when the Wolves pulled off that insane comeback down the stretch. Kind of basically committing 2 to Shea, forcing the ball out of his hands. The Nuggets, while the Thunder scored 127 points, I mean, the 140 that they allowed was the primary reason they lost the game. But especially in that second half and in the fourth quarter when Shea only took 2 shots, the Nuggets were able to force the ball out of his hands. The Thunder weren't able to make them pay for that. Again, the fact that Jalen Williams wasn't on the floor is part of that. But the Thunder have to be able to – it's good for them to see these things. That's what Shea was emphasizing last night, because they know they're going to see those sort of things in the playoffs. And so these tests are good experience for a team that, this group not, Hartenstein and Caruso weren't there, but it's the same core of the team. They only have 2 series of playoff experience. So, that's why people doubt them. It's not because they don't think that the Thunder are talented, or that they're, that the roster has holes in or anything like that, but they're a young team that hasn't done it yet. And those teams will always be doubted until they prove without a shadow of the doubt that they're a championship team.
Well,
As one of
people
our
do doubt the
producers,
offense too.
yeah. Well, as
I mean,
you've
wonder
talked
if they're
about
good
this,
enough.
Bontemps. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, people do wonder if they're good enough offensively to win. I mean, the other thing about that game Monday night is, I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, but I mean, Denver's shooting numbers in this game are insane. I mean, shot 60% from the field, shot 56% from 3, 18 for 32. They had 32 assists to 12 turnovers. Thunder obviously turned the teams over as much as anybody in the league. And the one of the biggest stories in the whole league over the last 2-3 months has been the return of all-star caliber Jamal Murray, and the guy had 34 and 6 and was the team best plus 14 in the game, and was 11 for 22 in 40 minutes. And like, if he's playing like that with Jokic, Denver can beat anybody. And that's the thing to watch there. But yeah, I mean, the Thunder defense has been subpar since the break. There's been some opponent shooting luck that's factored into that. But I also don't think, to your point, Brian, if they lose the second night of a back-to-back to the same Denver team they beat the day before, and then they lose on the road to the Celtics without Jalen Williams, depending on if he's able to play or not, whether he plays or not, it'd be pretty silly if people start going, oh, the Thunder are vulnerable because they lost those 2.
But they will. We know that.
Well,
I mean,
yes,
sure.
and
yeah.
I will continue to point out that Oklahoma City still has the best point differential in NBA history. So,
Yeah.
like, acting like this is some week 1 seed is pretty. It's a pretty insane take.
Well, one of our producers here, we were talking about this very topic this week here in LA, and one of our producers, one of the show producers on NBA Today, he was like, "Hey, I hate to just paraphrase Ric Flair, but to be the man, you got to beat the man," and that's very basic analysis. But that is the way people in the NBA, a lot of times players look at it. They respect. They tend to pay respect to people and teams for too long after they've won. That sometimes happens. Yeah. And then they tend to under-respect teams or players that haven't necessarily, gotten their official bona fides. And that is something that the Thunder are dealing with. And it's also something the Thunder don't care about. They have routinely made that clear. They don't care what people's opinion is of them. That is a bit of a mechanism to keep pressure off of you. I talked about this when I was there for media day. How nobody dared. They were the returning number one seed in the Western Conference. They went out and acquired Alex Caruso and signed Isaiah Hartenstein. Two of the more impactful moves of the Western Conference contenders, and nobody would bring up the word title or championship or any variation of it, because I think that it's more convenient for them not to have to deal with expectation. That's going to come no matter whether you try to push it off or not, and that's going to be a part of the Thunder's life going forward here, and it'll be part of how they approach this game in Boston. If you're got the best, differential in the history of the NBA, then come in and beat the champs, Buccos. That's the kind of the way people look at it. But at the same time, that's just the reality. The reality is they're the youngest team in the league that hasn't won at a high level yet, and so therefore they're disrespected, and that's the way it is.
And look, Sam Presti, his whole thing of, we haven't finished our breakfast yet before last season was absolutely a way to kind of downplay expectations and hold on, this is still a team that's in a rebuild and all that stuff. And then they were the number one seed, and Shea was the MVP runner-up. And there's no way that you're not going to have expectations with that group moving forward. Then this year they're going to win 60 whatever games. So the Thunder are in and will be for the foreseeable future, however long this window is. And typically today's NBA, they're 3 to 5 year windows. I think the Thunder are set up to have a longer window than that of championship or disappointment. I won't say bust, championship or disappointment type of seasons. That's the reality. That doesn't mean that the Thunder have to live in it in a daily basis. And I wrote a story this year about the culture of the Thunder is they embrace the boring, and it's a strength. They live in the let's get all the little details right. Let's do all the little things on a day-to-day basis to help us get better, and focus on that and not these grandiose, big picture discussions that yahoos like us are having on ESPN.
Well, look, the last thing the Thunder want is, I shouldn't say, something that they wouldn't necessarily want to have to deal with is if they don't win the title this year, the questions that would should they trade all these draft picks for star player X?
Sure.
I think Tim put it well. Tim put it well. They're trying to deal with championship expectations without it overwhelming them, which is what it is. It is a championship or bust season from the standpoint that if you're this good, if it is a disappointment, and there isn't a it's great if they got to the finals, but they'll be back. The last Thunder team is proof that you aren't necessarily going to get back if you get there and lose, right? And that, it's not to say it's different than saying it's a failure if they don't win, because I don't think it's a failure per se, but there isn't another outcome that you can look at and say it is a success either. If you have the best point differential of all time, if you have the possible MVP of the league on your team, your only goal should be to win the title, not to, get to the finals and go, oh, shucks, we'll be back. You just don't know if you will be back. But at the same time, if you're a team like the Thunder, there's no other way to approach the season than to try to minimize all of that stuff as much as possible and not have it drown your team in noise and expectations. And that's where the fact that, we've talked about all season, the fact that their star player is so cool, calm, and collected all the time, I think really helps. And,
I agree.
The coach, Mark Daigneault's the same way. They operate on a very low wavelength all the time. And, your team feeds off that. And I think it's played a big part in, despite the fact that the Thunder are a young team, them embracing the expectations as they have and rolling through the season like they have.
Okay. Also on Wednesday night, we've got an interesting game with the Timberwolves visiting the Nuggets. No Aaron Gordon going to be in that game. He's going to get an MRI, probably going to miss some time. He missed about 3 weeks each time he previously had the calf injury. Hopefully this one isn't as bad, but
too much calf injury talk this year.
Right. This is more interesting because of the Wolves, who are hot. Now, on one hand, I will point out that the Wolves have won 5 in a row. They are in seventh place right now, and they're looking at a bunch of teams in front of them that are dealing with injury problems. I don't know if they're going to be able to catch any of them, but you look at the, not catching the Thunder, obviously, but if you look at the contenders in the West, the Thunder just lost Jalen Williams. The Nuggets just lost Aaron Gordon. The Lakers just lost LeBron. The Grizzlies are without Jaren Jackson. The Rockets have been without Fred VanVleet for a while, and now are without Amen Thompson. But having said that, the Wolves have won 5 in a row. Now, the wins are not going to go to Springfield. Their 5 wins are against Phoenix, which continues to lose games despite having good players playing well. It's fascinating in a weird way. Phoenix, 76ers, Charlotte, Miami, who's been in a real rut, we'll talk about in a second, and San Antonio. That's the 5-game win streak. They play in Denver, and then they have a 5-game homestand, which concludes with a baseball series with the Pelicans. So, in fact, I think the among all the Western teams, because the West teams' strength of schedule is inherently going to be harder because the West teams are better.
I've got this right here.
Okay.
The four easiest schedules in the league down the stretch are Toronto, Philly, Atlanta, and Minnesota.
Right.
And Minnesota is the only West team in the top 13 in strength of schedule.
There you go. Yeah. So, of these teams that are all fighting for play-in positions and trying to avoid the play-in, Minnesota is playing well. They're healthy for the first time in a while. DiVincenzo is started to show some life, what they expected to get him before he had that toe injury. And their schedule is favorable. So Bontemps, Minnesota, I don't know about winning in Denver, but that would sort of verify their win streak. And, after a rough go of it, when all those guys got hurt, Gobert was out for a while. They've got a chance here to make up some ground.
Yeah, I mean, look, if we want to just get down to brass tacks on it, right? Golden State, who's won 9 of 10, hottest team in the league, is in 6th. They're 1 loss ahead. Then Houston's 4 losses ahead. Memphis is 5, and Denver and LA are 6. I mean, if we want, like in all those teams, like we just talked about, Denver's schedule's fairly easy. They're the second easiest West schedule, but the Lakers have the hardest schedule. Memphis has the 5th hardest schedule. So if they want to catch any of these teams, I think realistically, they've got to go 14-3, 13-4. I mean, right now they're at 36 wins. They got to get to 49 or 50 wins. I mean, if they go 14-3 against the schedule, which isn't impossible, it's a very easy schedule. Then you get to 50 wins. The Lakers go 8-11 down the stretch, or I should say 10-11 or down the stretch. They're at 50 wins. So, it's not impossible for Minnesota to really get up that high, but after some of these games they've kicked away lately, including losing to the Jazz right before this 5-game win streak, they've got an opportunity to make up a lot of ground in a hurry, but they've got to start doing it now and really take advantage of the schedule and these injuries in front of them.
Yeah, and they can't get him Ortiz because he's already been suspended for once, which was that loss to Utah. And when you mentioned them getting healthy, that I would say maybe most prominently included getting Julius Randle back.
Right.
He missed a month. He missed the whole month of February with his groin injury. And we can nitpick the quality of competition, but they won their last 5 games that he played before the groin injury. They've won the first 5 games that he's played since then. So with Julius Randle in the lineup, which, it's been a season-long kind of figure out the fit type of situation, but with Randle in the lineup, they've won 10 straight games. So, it's not nothing.
Yeah, well, that's relevant to keep our eye on. Just the difficulty and tightness of the Western Conference is, once again going to be a huge factor in the playoffs. As one of the Western Conference coaches said to me, I think I said this on the pod recently or on TV. They said, the Thunder out ahead of everybody, but all the rest of us 2 through 9 or whatever, 2 through 9 is what he said. We all think we can beat each other. We all flawed, and we all think we can beat each other. And so that's relevant to keep in mind as we watch how this plays out. All right, we'll be right back here on the. Well,
I was going to say, if the seeds hold up in the West right now, 2 Denver, 7 Minnesota. They had a hell of a series last year. That's all I'm going to say.
I think Ant would.
By the way,
look for another swing at it.
3 Lakers and 6 Warriors.
Yeah, that's probably an NBA TV series.
So on the day that the Miami Heat traded Jimmy Butler and ended their national nightmare, well, their domestic nightmare and our national nightmare, they won that day and they went to 25-25. Since the trade's actually been executed, they are 4-10. Coming into tonight, I think the Warriors are 12-1 when Butler plays. They might be 12-2 overall. They have blown a successive series of leads late in games. By the way, one of those wins came on a Bam Adebayo game winner.
Yep.
They have kind of been all over the place. And by the way, a lot of those games came at home. Like, they had a long road trip in there, but they had a long homestand too that they weren't able to take advantage of.
2-7 since the trade deadline.
Yeah, so in this little homestand they just had, they lost to the Timberwolves, which okay, but then they just lost the last two games at home to the Bulls and the Hornets. Both games they blew double-digit leads. Look, I mean, I know that they're always a dangerous team because of their nature. That is not the way they thought this would be going after this Jimmy Butler trade, and they still got, the Eastern Conference is so forgiving, but it's forgiving because you got to beat teams like the Hornets and the Bulls. And so Bontemps, like this, this is not shaping up the way the season that the Heat were planning on.
I mean, look, it's been a tough schedule for them overall, right? Like they have losses to Boston, to Oklahoma City, to a much healthier Dallas team, to Milwaukee, to the Knicks, to the Cavs, to the Wolves, right? Like those are all good teams that you look at the game and say, all right, it's not really a surprise the Heat are going to lose these games. But again, they lost a lot of those games close and late, which is tough. They've had multiple bizarre collapses in the fourth quarter of games this season. They played the Nets, and I want to say the Nets outscored them like 30-8 to end a game that they lost. Losing to Charlotte, which is obviously openly tanking at this point, or certainly doing everything they can to lose games, is bad. The Bulls have not beat a team with a winning record since January. Losing to them at home is bad.
Wow.
Those are all, and obviously the Heat aren't a team with a winning record, so that doesn't change that. But, look, the Heat we've joked about the Hawks being sort of the perpetual play-in team over the last few years in the East. Well, the Heat have been right there with them over and over again. And yes, they had Jimmy in the past and made a couple runs in the playoffs, but, this is where the Heat have been for the last 2 or 3 years. It's part of why they didn't extend Jimmy Butler in the first place. Like, they came into the season saying, let's see how good this team really is, and is this a team that's actually a top 4 team in the East, or is it the team that's been on the road in the first round for the last 5 years? And it's certainly been the latter and then some. And
they've been a play-in team. I mean, they were the number one seed a couple years ago, but they've been a dangerous play-in team. That's really what they've been.
Which they won't be a play-in team this year. They don't have Jimmy Butler.
No, they won't.
They now have Andrew Wiggins, and it's been a rough transition for Andrew Wiggins in Miami. The shooting numbers aren't pretty. The net rating is negative 9.9.
Is that good?
Per 100 possessions?
It's not a deal.
And listen, if they get bounced in the play-in, the good news is they will have a lottery pick. The bad news is the lottery protected pick that they owe the Oklahoma City Thunder becomes an unprotected pick that they owe the Oklahoma City Thunder every year. How is it like every single team?
By the way,
they're like the Thunder a pick.
Well, the other thing is that it's not even just the Thunder pick, right? So the Heat are in a very interesting position because they have a lottery protected pick this year, 2025, and then it becomes unprotected in 26 if they don't make the playoffs. They also have a lottery protected pick to Charlotte from the Terry Rozier Kyle Lowry trade last year in 2027, which if they don't convey the pick this year, it means next year's pick becomes unprotected. Means then they can't have a pick go in 27, which means it then becomes unprotected in 28. So it's not even just about making the playoffs this year. It's about going from having 2 lottery protected firsts to having 2 totally unprotected firsts out. And that is a scary situation to be in as a team because then if you do have a bad year, either of those years, you have no recourse to get out of it. So it's obviously imperative for them to make the playoffs. And look, the best thing they have going for them right now is the East play-in situation is quite rough. The Magic have been a disaster for 2 months. The Hawks are projected to finish 7th with 39 wins. And the Bulls are quite clearly, they'll be quite clearly happy to jump up in the lottery rather than jump up in the Eastern Conference play-in standings. So,
by the way, you mentioned that Rozier trade, which even the day they made the trade, I thought it was a strange move because the Heat typically want to hold their first-round picks in the future for like big swings. Rozier has been a disaster in Miami.
Yeah.
Yes, he has.
And he's not the only reason that their team is performing poorly. And look, he's like under some sort of investigation. I don't know what that is impacting him day to day. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But he's having the worst year he's had since he was like a second-year player. And he's lost his starting
40%
job.
from the field. He's shooting 40% from the field. He's shooting 30% from three. He's been in and out of the rotation, and they're 7 points better with him on the bench. Not great.
He's had some moments during this last 15 games where, like, they blew a game in Cleveland a couple days ago. Part of the Cavs corner. Just got that in there, ching. Where he made a couple of plays where I don't know where his head was. So, I think at times I think if Spo had a better option, he would go with it. But that Rozier trade is not bearing fruit. The Heat have made a lot of great transactions over the decades. That one is not among them. Hey, MacMahon, do you think we could get the Bontemps pigeon at our next live show?
I'd rather have the pigeon than Bontemps, so maybe we can make a trade there. Hey, we'll even give up a first-round pick along with Bontemps.
Protected?
I'll go unprotected to get rid of him.
Protected pick ain't getting it done.
I got to tell you something. We've had some great moments on this podcast and some not so great ones. I love the Bontemps pigeon. I don't read the comments. Jackson and Rafa, our producer, will read the comments. Give a suggestion for what we're going to name the pigeon. Thank you to Rafa, our producer. Jackson's on vacation. Lame. Went to Florida for spring break. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you, MacMahon. Thank you for watching and listening to the Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you later this week.
Adios, amigos.